Hey, tennis fans, and welcome to another edition of Matchpoint Canada, the official podcast of Tennis Canada. We're also members of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. And the final Grand Slam of 2020 has now come and gone at Roland Garros. Rafael Nadal won his 13th title in Paris at the French Open, and we had Iga Swiatek become the first Polish player ever to win a major in the Open era.
And for Canadian tennis fans, there was lots of reason for optimism with the return to form of Genie Bouchard and some impressive play from up-and-coming Leylah Annie Fernandez as both of them made the third round. To help us break down all the action from the past 2 weeks, we've got two of Canada's biggest tennis analysts and tennis fans as well. And we're happy to welcome Caroline Cameron from Sportsnet and Mark Masters from TSN. Great to have you both with us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. And we wanted to start on the women's side, and maybe I'll pose the question, Mark, to you first, and Caroline, you can chime in as well. But just looking at this run from Iga Swiatek, such a dominant tournament start to finish. She didn't drop a single set. In fact, her closest set was 6-4, and now she has her first Grand Slam title. I'm just curious, really, for both of you, what did you know about this player coming into the tournament? And do you think this is one of those like flashes in the pan, or is this a player we're going to see and hear from for years to come?
Yes. Well, I mean, recency bias would lead you to think that she's going to be a mainstay for a while. She just won the French Open, losing only 28 games. What did I know about her? She won the Wimbledon Junior title, I think, in 2018. She had been to a couple fourth rounds. Got absolutely smoked by Simona Halep last year at the French in the fourth round. So she was on the radar, but I did not see this coming. I mean, we had a discussion on the TSN show about how we were going to pronounce her name. So so it's not like we were expecting her to go all the way at the beginning of the week. But
the nice thing now, Mark, is on the WTA website, they've got that cool little feature where you can click on it and have the players pronounce their own name. And as much as that website frustrates me from time to time, that is a neat feature that they've got. So it's helpful. It's
a lifesaver. I'm so happy. I think every league should have to do that for every player. But so yes, it was very very surprising, I guess. Not that that she won it, but the way she won it as well. So is it more of a Yelena Ostapenko situation? I think she just turned 20 when she won the French Open. I feel like Swiatek has more of a complete game and could be more sustainable. But she said it herself, consistency is always going to be the key now moving forward. So I'm not sure what to make of it, but it certainly bodes well for her moving forward. I mean, to win it the way she did.
It's kind of like any of these teenagers who've kind of burst onto the scene in the WTA, and you could even say on the ATP is now where when things get really tricky. I mean, sure, it's hard enough to win a Grand Slam in your first Grand Slam, especially at that age. But now, in terms of being consistent, no one's going to be surprised when they're up against you. They know what to expect and they'll be prepared. But to piggyback on what Mark was saying, I think she does have a good all-around game. And I was really impressed just with her forehand, how aggressive she was. But for me, I didn't know much about her past what Mark said. I just remember covering Rogers Cup last year, and she made it, I believe it was to the third round. She played Naomi Osaka, and it was something like 7-6, 6-4. And she played well. Like, she had a good showing. But, yeah, other than that, I mean, no one expected her to come in and win the French Open. But she's really poised for her age in a way similar to Bianca Andreescu and what we saw last year. But now just the question is, at that age, how
I remember back to Rogers Cup last summer in Toronto, and she beat Caroline Wozniacki in either the first or second round. And I wasn't sure really how to put that into context because Wozniacki hadn't been playing her best game anymore at that point. And but was definitely impressed. But nobody, again, who would have picked this one? I don't know what you would have made if you put money down on her at the start of the tournament.
Oh my gosh.
But somebody's smiling somewhere, probably in Poland, I would imagine. Was there anybody on the women's side that you had higher expectations for that didn't really pan out? I don't know if maybe Serena or I mean, Bianca wasn't there obviously, so probably not a Canadian, but anyone that you had higher hopes for that just didn't sort of go according to plan?
For me, it was Halep. And I mean, granted, she lost to the eventual champ, but especially coming off winning Rome. I was surprised that she didn't do better. And again, just like everyone in this tournament, she was beat by Iga straight sets. And Serena, I had higher hopes too. And I know we're going to talk about Serena as the podcast goes on, but I just keep thinking, each slam, I think, this is the perfect opportunity now for Serena to make history. And then every time since 2017, it isn't.
I mean, we can go down that route for a second because, time is starting to run out for her. And I mean, I just turned 40 this past summer, and I just know in my men's league hockey how much harder it is for me. Don't even get me started on the tennis court, but she's turning 40 next year, and the opportunities are certainly dwindling. And Ben, you and me spoke with her coach, Patrick Mouratoglou, this summer, and he pretty much said, at this point, she's only continuing to catch that record, to tie and hopefully overtake Margaret Court. What do you guys think? Mark, maybe we'll turn over to you for a second. And what do you think? How realistic is it to think that that's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add one last thing on Swiatek, because you guys brought up the Toronto match. I found it interesting that she did an Instagram Live with Osaka recently and said that was the moment in Toronto, that Wozniacki match, where she finally felt comfortable playing on a big stage, and that something clicked for her. She lost that first set 6-1 to Wozniacki, and then she felt, even though she lost a close match to Osaka next, that she wasn't even upset because she felt like she had really turned a corner there. So you never know when a player's gonna have that moment, and apparently it happened for her in Toronto. So that's kind of cool. As for Serena, I don't know. Do we think this is a real record? I just wonder. Just go around the horn. Like I know it certainly matters to her and it motivates her, but like it doesn't really matter, right?
No,
I mean, she's the greatest of all time.
Yeah, we should note. When Steffi Graf set her Grand Slam record and I think reached 22, nobody was ever talking about Margaret Court. This was not a record, not a number that was ever brought up. And I think what you're talking about, like 11 Australian Opens, where the field was essentially Australian players. So it is really not in the same ballpark. I wonder if it was just a goal that her and Patrick Mouratoglou set to just keep her motivated and keep her pushing and playing, like just another thing to chase. Because I think we would have, if Margaret Court hadn't been brought into the discussion, we would have been happy to declare Serena as the GOAT for all intents and purposes, just by virtue of winning 23 Grand Slams.
Yeah. Serena's so proud too, and throughout her career, she's had to shut up the naysayers. So I think this is more a number and a moment where if she has the record, then you can't ask any questions. I think it's more so that. But it's interesting because it clearly does bother her. And I don't know, Mark, what you've thought, or any of you guys. I think it's just interesting in recent slams when she loses, everything that she's saying at the podium, it doesn't have to do as much with physical. I know at the French Open it did, but a lot of it is her not being able to answer why mentally she can't get over it. So it's kind of that she's lacking confidence, which is something that we don't see often from her. And not only that, but she herself doesn't have the answers as to why she just can't get past that mental hurdle.
Yeah, and I mean, she's made still 4 finals of majors since she's come back from giving birth, and she made them relatively quickly after returning to the tour as well, which I thought was super impressive. But Caroline, you're right. I mean, Patrick was saying to us that it's that mental sort of fortitude in those moments, which we never would have questioned that with Serena previously. So it's kind of bizarre seeing her in that vulnerable kind of state.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed. She used to have this big mental edge going into these finals, and now it's almost like the players that are playing her are relishing the chance to get her on when she's coming down now. Like they're not intimidated. They actually think this is great, and they get the chance, and they're hitting freely. And we saw Bianca Andreescu, of course. And I think that the moment in Toronto probably helped her as well, even though that wasn't a full match. But she did not really get flustered at all. I mean, she started well in that match, and Serena really hasn't come close in those 4 finals that she's been in. She hasn't won a set in any of them. So, and it's not getting easier for sure. You'd think Wimbledon, I guess, would be her best chance, and she lost that tournament, as did everyone this year. And so we'll see. I mean, you can't bet against her because she's Serena and she serves well for 2 weeks at Wimbledon. She certainly can win that tournament, but it just feels like the way the women's game is now, there's always going to be someone there. If it's not Halep, maybe Muguruza or, Swiatek or Andreescu comes back to health. It's deep. It's deep at the top now, it feels like. And it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and well, you make a good point just overall, because I think we're at an interesting place with the women's tour overall, because we feel like we have quite a blend of these veteran players who are still posting great results. Simona Halep, for example, obviously one of those players who's a contender wherever she goes. Petra Kvitova still plays great at slams. Victoria Azarenka, we've seen a resurgence from, just made a U.S. Open final. Garbine Muguruza earlier in the season making a final. And then you have this young crop of players as well who, unlike the men's side, they are going out and winning Grand Slams. Naomi Osaka has a few. Sophia Kenin now 2 slam finals this season. Are we transitioning like to a place where it's all about the young players right now, or are we going to see this balance for some time between just kind of like that push and pull between veteran players and the young guns?
I think it's still going to be a bit of a push and pull, as it has been in recent years. And if you even look at the likes of like Coco Gauff, I mean, she's still 16 years old. And with youth kind of comes this idea of you're not really aware of exactly what's going on in the moment if it's new to you, and that gives you a little bit of an edge, it seems, over experience. And some women in the field who have been fighting just to get their first slam or second or third slam, and so on. I think someone like Ash Barty could really change that. I think she's the type of person where if she was consistent, which you could say about anyone, I think she could find dominance in the game. But other than that, it's really the perfect opportunity for players like Leilani Fernandez, who's been aforementioned, the young Canadian. So I find it exciting that it's pretty wide open, because you still see the usual veterans, but it just leaves room for some new, fresh star power.
Yeah, even in this crazy French Open, we still had Petra Kvitova against Sophia Kenin in a Grand Slam semifinal. So, I mean, Kvitova, obviously multiple Grand Slam champion at Wimbledon. Azarenka back in the conversation, which has really been a great story to see. It's just unpredictable. I mean, Azarenka, beat Kenin 6-love, 6-love in Rome, and then Kenin goes on to make the final at the French Open. It is a fun time because of that unpredictability, but the depth of it allows you to have pretty high quality tennis and pretty good storylines regardless. And
then throw COVID in the mix too, right? And very unpredictable.
Craziness. I was saying to Ben on our last podcast, I think, that this was the first Grand Slam tournament in a while where I was equally excited for both the men's and the women's draw, because like we just said, women's tennis right now is super. There's so many personalities and emerging talents, and it feels like there's a new one at every slam to take notice of. And on the men's side, I don't want to say I was getting bored of the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic dominance, but the U.S. Open was refreshing to get a couple of new faces in the finals there. So I was really excited for both draws. And then, let's transition to the men's side. The result was the predictable French Open result when Nadal, once again, his 13th title in Paris, his 100th win there. I could quote stats all podcast long. There's so many impressive moments and measures that he's reached now. But if we talk about that final for a second, it didn't quite live up to the hype, unfortunately, did it? And I don't know if that was because of an injury potentially to Djokovic, or just the fact that Nadal seized the moment and realized the importance of what that meant for him. What did you take away from that final match? And did you watch all the way through, or did your channel change at all after those first 2 sets went by in such a blitz?
I watched the whole thing. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought, I even though it was very one-sided, more one-sided than certainly anyone thought it would be, I just enjoy watching Nadal. I mean, anyone at their peak, at their best. And even though he's 34, to be able to put forward a performance against like that, I was really jacked up just myself to watch it. I was like, okay, I felt like the whole tournament had been building. I was doing all these interviews with people, and I wasn't even asking them, like, what do you think about this 4th round match that they're playing? I mean, Nadal played one match where Sebastian Korda was literally like, thank you for letting me be on the other side of the net with you. Can you sign my shirt after the match? And like, he's in press talking about how it would have been great if Nadal had hit this great winner against him. So like, he was like cruising, and it, like, honestly, it just felt like everything was a prelude, and then it didn't live up to the hype. I really thought Djokovic hadn't lost a completed match all year. And, I don't think Djokovic gets the credit for being as good a clay court player as he is. I mean, just like Federer, he would have won multiple French Opens for sure if he wasn't playing at the same time as Nadal. So it's disappointing, but Nadal was just a beast in this tournament. I mean, I know it's on the list to talk later, but it might have been one of his most impressive titles, if not right up there on the short list. Recency bias again makes you think like, wow, that was incredible. That was his 4th time he hasn't lost a set en route to the title, but he just dismantled Djokovic. It was amazing. So I enjoyed it, even though it wasn't the 5-set, satisfying, 5-hour, slugfest that I thought maybe it would be. So I enjoyed it.
I think anytime you can watch someone who's the greatest in the world do something like Nadal playing tennis on clay, you watch it regardless of how it's going. It's how I felt about even watching LeBron win his 4th title when it wasn't a good final game against the Heat. You still want to watch, and years from now you can remember, oh yeah, I watched when he made history. So yeah, it was a disappointing match in that it wasn't great, but I just think it's so cool for Nadal to tie Federer for 20. And when we talk about Serena Williams and if how many slams she has really matters as the final total, I just think it's so telling that Federer and Nadal right now are tied. And you saw Federer quickly coming to Twitter and releasing a statement saying how proud he is of Nadal and happy he is to share that record with him. It's just good for the sport of tennis. And I was really happy to see Nadal make history, but he's just so good. It's ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous when you have 2 people like Nadal and Djokovic who are far above the rest of the field, and yet then on clay Nadal is even further ahead of Djokovic. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, these two, because as they're making their way through these tournaments and they're cruising to like comfortable straight set victories, both of them themselves have another level they can play, and they're not yet playing their best level and still beating like Hachanov's 3-3 and 4, for Nadal just like beating Sinner in straight sets. And then they always bring it, of course, to that peak, which we see in the final. And it's interesting because the last 2 finals these two have played have been very one-sided. Djokovic crushed him, of course, at the Australian Open final in 2019, and Nadal has the response here in 2020. And it was funny, he was asked if it was sort of revenge, and he said, I'm not really into revenge matches. That's not really how he's wired. But now that we're just on the topic, he has tied Roger Federer for 20 Grand Slams. 13, I don't want to get into like a GOAT debate, but 13 French Opens, 13 Grand Slam titles just at one event. Is this one of these records where I think we're probably not going to see broken in our lifetimes, I imagine?
Hey, time out for just a second, because Ben, you do want to get into a GOAT debate. I know that Nadal fan that's buried deep down. You want to get us into that.
Oh, I don't know about that. No. We can have that debate. We can have that debate when their careers are over. But it's funny because Djokovic, the way he was charging, the way he was playing, I think if this had been a title that he had won, you'd have plenty of people out there saying there's a strong argument, strong case to be made that Djokovic could be the best player of all time. So it's amazing the weight we place on one match when it comes to Grand Slam titles.
Yeah, history was definitely hanging in the air in that match, just with the swing that you would have had. All the finals that they play now seem to have a swing in it. It's funny, Djokovic, again, lost only 1 completed match this year, and it still feels like a bad year for him because of missed opportunities at the U.S. Open, and now, especially at the U.S. Open, that he's going to be just, if he ends up 1 slam back, or it's just because he has the head-to-head edge on the other 2, and he has the Golden Masters. He's won all those tournaments, and he does have some other things going for him. But I think that because of how much weight we put into Grand Slams, that will be the top line in this. And again, it's remarkable that how Nadal has been able to mentally compartmentalize that, because he says, he said it a couple times, and he said it again after this match that he beat Djokovic. I don't think about the guy beside me having a better house or a better car or a better phone, and I'm just looking at what I can do. I'm really impressed with Nadal's mental strength, all their mental strength. But if you look at this French Open, it was later in the year, so it was cooler. There was night matches. He had one match end at 1:25 a.m., which is the latest match ever at the French Open because they got the lights this year. They had the new balls that he didn't like, heavier balls, Wilson balls. And he aired his grievances. He mentioned it before the tournament, and he said, but you know what? I'm going to be positive from now on. That's how I'm going to approach it. And he didn't really complain at all the rest of the way. It didn't seem to affect him at all. And it just kind of reinforced his legacy that this guy's untouchable because he can do it in the fall and with different balls. And he's playing Djokovic, playing really well. So to me, this just reinforces that what he's done at the French Open, as you mentioned, isn't going to be touched again, probably, certainly not in our lifetimes.
Can I just mention, it's kind of going off topic, because I'm in agreement that you have to have the greatest of all time debate once Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic are all finished their careers. And I think regardless of where they actually rank in terms of total slam wins, there will still be debates and it'll still be up for discussion because of the head-to-heads. But going back to the US Open, I loved that final. And that was one of my favorite finals between Zverev that I'd seen in recent memory, because for the first time, without having one of the big three or even four, is you were watching guys who didn't know how to win. And you were watching them try and figure it out while their bodies were going against them. And it just, to me, my heart was just pounding more. It was a little bit more fun. Like, I love the elegance of watching Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer go head to head, and there's still tension. But we've seen it so many times that just seeing Zverev and team try and keep it together.
And they both succeeded and failed at different moments in that match.
Totally, yeah. It was
all over.
Organized chaos, kind of. Like, it was great. I loved it. I think that's good for the game.
That tournament to me kind of felt like, the parents are away for the weekend and the kids are having a party. And then the parents came back for the French Open and kind of said, that's it, party's over. We're back. We're putting our foot down. We were talking to Jimmy Connors actually a few weeks ago, and he said he's looking forward to seeing sort of the transition, but not a full transition where the big three retire and then let these guys have their moment. He wants to see both sides kind of have their time where they're able to go at it head to head and produce some good tilts between the big three and, the next gen or whatever you want to call them. Are you guys kind of hoping that we have a transition period like that where there's some back and forth from both sides as opposed to the older guys just sort of, fading away, so to speak?
Yeah, I am. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say subtle name drop there with Connors, but go ahead.
Hey, he was one of my childhood idols. I've been dropping that name for 3 weeks straight every chance.
As you should. Okay.
I was going to say, what happened this week that you got me and Mark on? I guess it's because it's a holiday Monday.
You can't win them all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
The thing is we've been talking about this transition from the next gen to the next gen, rather, before we ever even called it the next gen, like the Nishikori generation, the Milos Raonic generation, who are now 29, 30. We have seen like Milos in a semifinal at Wimbledon against Federer, and we've seen a bit of the transition. I think the biggest one is team against Rafa on clay, because he has found some success and he has pushed him. Yeah, I want to see like Tsitsipas. I love seeing against this old guard. But it's really, I'm kind of waiting for like Shapovalov or Felix to really have their push. Medvedev, we've seen a little bit, but I'd love to see a rivalry created, but I don't know how much time those big three are going to give us. And I don't mean them leaving the game soon. I just don't know how much wiggle room they're going to give us. It's kind of like what you said, Mike. It's when the parents are away, the children will play. Well, when the parents are there, they just want to play against each other.
I enjoyed Tsitsipas saying after he advanced to the semifinals that he was asked about being next gen. And he's like, I'm an adult now. I've graduated. But I don't know if he has, to be honest. I don't know if he has, because none of these young guys have shown that they can go toe-to-toe with the big boys at the majors. And it's so hard that you have to win. You have to go through two of them at most of these Grand Slams. It's like it's impossible almost. In best of five, which is the great it's not the great equalizer. It's the opposite of that. It's the great divider. It's just so hard. They won't beat themselves. They're so strong. I like the way the men's game is right now, because it almost feels like you got two competing streams going on. It's the young guys battling to be the next one, and the big boys being like, who's going to be the legacy, like who's going to have the best legacy. But I mean, I guess I'll be that guy. Like, who do you guys think is, like, right now, if you had to put a couple bucks down, who's going to finish with the most majors on the men's side? Like, do you see Fed coming back, like doing a 20 partying like it's 2017 again, coming back from the knee injury in Australia? Or it's hard to fathom that Nadal won't win a couple, maybe more French Opens at least. And Djokovic is still the best guy on and hard. He's coming back in Australia where he's won 8. So if you had to bet, I don't know where I'd go. I feel like it's Nadal now again, just maybe that's because it's so fresh in my mind, but
I mean, of those three, Roger's going to have the toughest time, not only because he's that much older than them, but also because he missed, all of this season pretty much because of injury. So, if we go back a bit, between 2012 and 2017, he didn't win a single slam until that Aussie Open, which still kind of blows my mind. But then you're right, Mark, he came back from that injury and was great in winning 2 of the 4 slams in 17, and then Aussie Open again in 2018. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him, but at the same point, it's going to be the biggest challenge for him. Nadal and Djokovic both seem to have, at least a couple or many more for Djokovic. I'd say he has the most upside. Nadal I'm always worried with him and the knees and the body and how much he can withstand every year. And he's continued to prove me wrong year after year. So I don't want to go out on a limb and say who I think is going to have the most, but Djokovic and Nadal are certainly far from being done. And the little Federer fan in me that exists from pre-media days certainly wouldn't complain if he had one last Wimbledon in him.
I know. I was thinking, do I answer this who I want it to be or who I think it's going to be? I think it'll be Djokovic, and I think that's what makes tennis really interesting right now. Is Djokovic? It's pretty well reported and broadcast that he just doesn't have the same public perception and love for him that Federer and Nadal do. And Federer and Nadal are two buddies, as I said. I mean, Federer's the first to tweet out his congratulations to Rafa for tying his record. And Federer said he's always happy to see Rafa win. And if there was anyone to surpass him, I think he would want it to be Rafa. I think it's Djokovic just because of the years that he still has to go. And on the hard courts, I still think he could beat anyone. He wants it so bad too. And yet, again, that goes back to the discussion is will he still be seen as the greatest of all time if he has the most Grand Slams? I don't know. Because then people throw in likability with that and head-to-heads. And I don't know, it's a little political.
It is.
You got to be careful what we say.
Yeah, he's still chasing actually that record of world number 1 for consecutive weeks, for total weeks that Roger Federer has held for so long when he passed Pete Sampras. So there's all these mini records within the overall Grand Slam record, but I think the telltale stat for me on the direction of where Grand Slams have been going has just been this past decade. Novak Djokovic won 16 Grand Slams over the past decade. Nadal had 10. And Federer had 4 because he did have that dry spell, as you mentioned, Mike, nothing from 2012 until that return in 2017, winning the Australian Open. But my sense from Roger Federer fans is they would be ecstatic if he could just win one more Wimbledon, if he could win one more Slam, because he is that age right now where he's certainly on the way out. I wonder myself if he really only has one more season left. I know he was keen to play the Olympics, so Nadal and Djokovic have a few more years to play and more slams to rack up. And I know Federer would be at peace with Nadal passing and owning the record. I don't know if he'd be at peace with Djokovic owning it, though.
Mm-hmm.
He may not have a choice. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Nadal. I think he's got a couple more French and one more somewhere else, and that'll get him to 23. And then I think Djokovic is going to pass Federer, but I don't think he's going to be able to catch Nadal. And it's amazing that Federer might finish third after all of this. Like, when he passed Sampras, that was like amazing. And it was like an incredible feat. And Sampras was there. And it was like, wow, no one thought anyone was going to touch Sampras. And now Federer might be third. I think he will be, but
that was over a decade ago too. He was 27 years old when he won his 14th. Federer was. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's bonkers.
And I think
when that number was set, we thought, nobody can do that again. And now we have two other guys. So yeah, even if Federer is third in the Grand Slam count, I still think there will be an argument, not just from his fans, from other people who observe the sport, feeling he is still the greatest of all time, and he might still end up with the most career titles. He's chasing Jimmy Connors, actually, with that 109 number. So just another mention.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show, yeah. Jimmy Connors. Yeah, my BFF, Jimmy Connors, who has that record. Caroline mentioned Denis Shapovalov and Felix, and obviously we would love to see them make these deep runs at Grand Slam tournaments. And we spoke so positively of what they both did at the U.S. Open, particularly Denis Shapovalov reaching his first ever quarterfinal. To some, it may have felt even like a missed opportunity because he was playing Pablo Carreño Busta with an opportunity to reach the semis. But both performing so well at Flushing Meadows, and then I know it's such a quick turnaround, you don't get a proper clay court season, but they kind of had a flop at the French Open. Felix out in the first round to Yoshihito Nishioka. Denis loses to Roberto Carballes Baena. A little controversy over that match. We don't have Hawkeye. It could have been a line call that maybe helps out Denis, or obviously in this case hurt him. But was this a setback tournament for them, or are they kind of young enough to just brush this aside and get right back at it at the next tournament, do you think?
Yeah. I don't read too much into the French Open. Certainly not Denis's. Denis, he made the semis in Rome. Mm-hmm. He's in St. Petersburg now. Feel if they're all playing, they still have tournaments to go here. I see it more as a blip than anything too much. Certainly for Denis, especially, he had a lot of momentum. Top 10 debut, first quarterfinal of major. Felix seemed pretty drained at the end of the French. Like he just seemed like he was mentally a little fatigued. It's not easy for the younger guys to come back and play week after week in these bubble kind of situations, and some tournaments no fans, some little few fans. It's tricky. So Felix certainly seemed a little drained, and Denis was feisty after he lost, talking about the missed, in his mind, the missed call. And that's a whole other kettle of fish with Hawkeye, and is it accurate, and Fox 10, and when will we have video review, and blah 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 blah. But so I think it's a blip for Denis. Felix, I think it's a blip too. Ultimately. I was talking to Louis Borfiga, name drop, Tennis Canada's high performance guy, not Jimmy Connors, but he was saying he wants Auger-Aliassime to play a little more doubles moving forward, help his net game so he can finish points a little bit easier, which Shapovalov has done. So I think I'm not reading too much into it. That for Auger-Aliassime was his first French Open. Feels like he's been around forever. That was his main draw debut. So more of a blip, I think, for me than anything for those two at the French.
I think it's to what you were saying, Mark, just about it's hard being in these bubble environments when you're younger, but I think it's also hard when you're not playing as much tennis as you're used to week in and week out and match play. And that's where I think Felix, it'll really help him playing the doubles. We saw at the U.S. Open how much Denis's game was improved from playing doubles. His net game, I was so impressed with how much better it was. And for Denis too, which struck me at the U.S. Open in particular, was just how much more he's matured on the court. He still takes those risks and sometimes tries to paint the line for a winner when he could probably just try and hit it a few inches into the court. But that's why everyone likes watching him play. And that's why you're drawn to him, because he adds that excitement value to his game and to the court. But yeah, I think like Mark, it wasn't a great result, as you know, for either of them at the French, but it's nothing to be concerned about.